on the economy.
Honourable Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the House is very grateful for that lesson in business from that resting on the vast experience in the real world of that member. I'm sure we'll enjoy that. I do challenge those members to check some of their facts and around the job creation side of what he's just been talking about. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, every time the far left socialist coalition over there speaks, opens, welcomes socialism with open arms, as does the new leader. Congratulations to the new leader. Every time they open their mouths, New Zealand mortgages suffer. Every single time they open their mouth. That speech right there, the leader of the opposition speech right there, New Zealand mortgages will suffer if in fact they're ever to get near the Treasury benches. Mr. Speaker, the multi-billion-dollar borrowing program from overseas, which the three contestants in the Labour Party leadership contest committed their party to, if they're to come in government, will mean New Zealand mortgages will be so much higher than they are now, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the opposition cannot wait to get its sticky fingers on the Reserve Bank. They cannot wait to get the independence of monetary policy out of the clutches of the world-renowned Reserve Bank here in New Zealand. The moment they talk about that, the moment they went there this last time in 2008 with an inquiry, actually New Zealand mortgages will go higher if in fact they are ever to get anywhere near implementing that policy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the results of the better public services, prudent management of our economy are starting now to be enjoyed by more and more New Zealanders all the time. There are lower mortgage rates, half of what they were under Labour in 2008, Mr. Speaker, in spite of the global financial crisis, in spite of the efforts we're having to do in around the Christchurch and Canterbury earthquake tragedies. I must note, Mr. Speaker, we should contrast where we are now with 2008, source of data being the pre-election update, Mr. Speaker, the document that introduced the decade of deficits to our country, because I do note at that time the Associate Minister, one of the Associate Ministers of Finance was one Mr. David Cunliffe, who was an Associate Minister of Finance in 2008 when the decade of deficits arrived in New Zealand. Mr. Speaker, 2008, under Labour government, New Zealand had been in recession for over 1 year. Under National right now, some of the highest growth in the OECD. Mr. Speaker, under Labour, when the Associate Finance Minister was one David Cunliffe, we had 10% floating mortgages. Mr. Speaker, under National right now, 5% floating mortgages, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under Labour, when Mr. Cunliffe was an Associate Minister of Finance, we only had 4% real wage growth over 9 years, Mr. Speaker. Here, under the National Government, over just 5 years, we had 22% growth in after-tax wages. Mr. Speaker, inflation, when Mr. Cunliffe was an Associate Finance Minister, was nudging 5%, destroying financial assets of New Zealand and pumping up an ongoing housing boom. Under National, 0.5 to 1.5% under control. Mr. Speaker, in 2008, under Labour, exports had been in recession for many, many years. Under National, growing, manufacturing growing, all export sectors are growing and having a brighter future. Mr. Speaker, under Labour, when David Cunliffe was one of the Associate Finance spokesmen, tax take went up 50%. Taxes went up 50%. Under National 2013, rebalancing the tax system to target those that speculate on property. Mr. Speaker, under Labour in 2008, an explosion of the LAQCs, no one really hears that anymore, a product of the distorted tax system of the Labour government backed up by the Greens when Mr. Cunliffe was one of the Associate Finance spokesmen, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, after 5 years in government, New Zealanders are better off if there's no better proof than the mortgage rates that New Zealanders are paying, which are half of what they were under the Labour government.
Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, over the years, New Zealand First has raised a number of issues in this Parliament